I think Saddam kept Iran in check a lot better than without him.
Yeah.
Do you think that Iraq, on the whole, was a mistake entirely?
I don't have all the information that, leaders are paid to make decisions based off that information, but I think yes.
Yeah.
I think yes.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, go in there, remove Saddam if we had to for some reason, but completely dismantling the rest of the party just left a huge vacuum that allowed the insurgency to come in there and fill that up. But I think, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I don't disagree. All right, so you wrapped that platoon up. It seemed like, or deployment up, I guess. Everything, like you guys swept through Mosul, took it back over.
Yep. So we finished the entire west side clearance. And then there's a river that bifurcates Mosul between the east and the west. The west is the high-rise buildings, very urbanized. And then the east is what they call Old Town Mosul, which is the old city, mud kalat structures, more typical, ancient Middle Eastern type structures. So we finished that clearance and then turned over with SEAL Team 7. The timing just worked perfectly where they landed in country with about a week of operations left, so they could get on the ground, get a feel for operations, build relationships. And then we finished the clearance and had about a week to turn everything over logistically. We left, and then they finished the eastern part of the clearance of Mosul.
Yeah, that's pretty slick.
Yeah.
When you came back from that, or even I guess as you were wrapping that up, did you know at that point that you wanted to get out?
No, I didn't. Until I made the decision to get out, I never really thought about getting out. Like the SEAL teams are everything and more than I ever hoped they would be.
What was the thought process, if you can kind of walk us through getting home and then ultimately punching out?
So there was, but by the time that I got back from there in early 2017, there was still about a 2-year period before I made that decision. So I asked to do another troop commander tour because I was very junior. I was spot promoted to do that tour. So I was thinking, I got plenty of time to kill. I'll do another troop commander tour. And my very amazing commanding officer just kind of laughed at me and was like, no. Nice try. I appreciate it, but no. Yeah. Then he said, hey, you can stay here at 5 and be the operations officer if you want to. And I did not want to leave 5. It was the best team I've ever been a part of. And the next commanding officer that was coming in was just another complete stud. And the command master chief was going to be my first platoon chief, Dave Hansen.
Wow.
So I'm like, there's no way I want to leave this team. So I stayed and took the operations job, which I loved. I know a lot of people aren't thrilled about that job, but I had great bosses. And man, the command itself just was almost like a party every time you went there. Not in a bad way, but just everyone was just fired up to train and work and get after it. So it was a great environment to be in.
What is a typical day of an ops boss at a SEAL team?
Oh my goodness.
Is there one a typical?
No, it's kind of just all over the place. So the job of the operations officer is to complete the commanding officer's intent. So the commanding officer will say, this is a generic statement, but like, hey, this troop's going to Iraq, this troop is going to wherever, this troop's going to PACOM, and he's not dictating that, but he's delivering the message of where people are going. And then what that means is we have a very dedicated training structure that gets us good on the basics that we need, but then each of those platoons need gear for that specific theater, specific training for that theater, and it's the operations officer's job and the operations shop job to prepare the team for deployment. So all of the training, all the administrative stuff more or less falls on the executive officer, but anything operationally the team needs falls on our shoulders. So lots of different projects, but hey, it's not boring, that's for sure.
It sounds like that would actually be a better gig than the XO.
1,000%.
To me, the XO seems like the shittiest job.
If you would have asked Adam, who was by far the smartest dude I've ever met in the SEAL teams, and the best example I could ever have as an XO, because that was my next tour, was an XO equivalent. To have him as my model for an XO was like the best gift I could have been given. But if you would have asked him, would you want to change spots with me?
100%.
Well, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I can imagine. So you did that for 2 years?
I did that for a year. And then I screened so there's a selection process for executive officers. I screened when I was just about a year in that seat. And usually what happens when you get picked up for executive officers, you finish your tour, you go into a list of people that have already been approved, and then the community just kind of says, well, I need this guy here, I need that guy there. And usually there's like a year or two before you get put into the role of an executive officer. Well, I got plucked right from there and got chosen to go lead the training command, training detachment 1, which was a dream come true. So unfortunately for me, I didn't get to deploy with the guys from SEAL Team 5 because it just a team like no other. But the consolation prize for me, which was amazing, was I got to go run the training command. And as you know, aside from deploying, what does our community put the biggest emphasis on? Training.
Yeah.
Training.
How long were you there for?
I was there for 2.5 years. So it's usually a 1.5 year tour, but there was some shuffling that needed to happen. Somebody in an executive officer role got fired towards my about 1.5 year mark of being in TRADET. So the guy that was supposed to bump me out needed to go and fill that role. So the Commodore asked me if I wouldn't mind extending at TRADET. I'm like, I'll stay at TRADET for as long as you want me to stay at TRADET. So it was during that time that my wife and I made the decision to get out of the community. Yeah. And what really drove it for me was just, I said at kind of the beginning of this, I only ever really had 2 goals. One was to be a good SEAL, which I hope I accomplished. And then the other was to be a great father and a great husband. And when I looked at the ages that my kids were, and I looked at the remainder of my career, because I still had, at the time I made the decision, 8 years left. I had never moved. I had been operational in San Diego the whole time. That was over with now, because now my executive officer tour was over with. I did it very, very young, which meant I'm free cheese to the community. They can use me wherever they need to use me. So I knew we were going to move. I was going to deploy a lot in non-operational roles. There were no wars going on anymore.
You'd wind up in Bahrain or Diego Garcia as a logistics guy. Some things where you can still serve the community and do great things. But when I looked at what the future held for me versus the weight I was going to put on the family, we made the decision to walk away. And to backpedal a little bit, what put me in that frame of mind was, and this is a lesson for all you leaders out there, that really good commanding officer, whose nickname was Beef, my SEAL Team 5 commanding officer when I was a troop commander, he sat me down when it was detailing time, and he said, hey, you're to the point now where your moves matter in your career if you want to be a commanding officer of a SEAL team. So let's map your career out. And he said, hey, give me your dream list of jobs. You've got 10 years left at the time. He said, each tour is 2 years. Let's build out the next 10 years and just say you got every single job that you wanted to get along the way. What would those jobs be? So I'm like, this is great. I write them down. And then he says, he's a father too. And he said, now I want you to write the age that your kids will be underneath all of those tours. And I started writing the ages out, and it starts to hit me right in the gut. I'm like, oh my goodness, man. And I looked at my last tour where if I did 20 years and I wanted to retire at 20, my oldest son was going to be 18 and leaving the house. Right when I have time to spend with them and really invest in all of my kids, my oldest son was going to leave that same year. Yeah. And then my next son was going to be gone the next year. And man, it really took me back. That's such an important and valuable exercise for a leader to instill and put you through. That's really cool. Who was that? His
name's Beef. Yeah, Brian Dreschler. Just
that's
the
awesome.
Man. The man. And as a troop commander, the amount of faith that he gave me was just unbelievable too. Yeah. Just awesome boss. Awesome boss. Awesome SEAL.
Yeah, that's amazing.